Hi everyone, Kathy Beltran with Wings and Whispers. Welcome back to the channel. In this episode, we are going to be finishing or starting step 5 of creating the angel wings behind me. So by now, you should have all 3 of your cardboard layers all shaped and taped and ready to go. So there's going to be a few different things we're going to do in this step. We're going to be working with our glue gun. We'll still have some drawing that we have to do, and we'll prepare our paper and start the mache process. We will be working on 3 separate layers. So you're not going to be gluing any of the layers together yet. You're going to paper mache both front and back of all 3 pieces. So, but before we can do that, we are going to be working with each feather and each center feather. So I call it the ridge line in between each of the, or in the center of each of the feathers. Now, I'm kind of ahead of myself with some of the paper mache for the sake of the video. But what I want you to do is on your first big layer, I want you to see where it lines up, because you don't want to have to draw your line all the way across. You want to know how much on each feather you're going to have to put the glue, which we'll be working with next. So if you don't want to have to, you could keep this on and then draw your center line on each of the feathers. Or you could just kind of gauge it, have this off to the side, and draw in your lines. So I have penciled in a line, and I will go all the way to the top of the arch. So I'll keep doing it, and I will do it to each one. So you'll want to make sure, and you want to make sure that's a little bit dark so you can see it as you're working the next step. So make sure the first thing you do is pencil in your center of each feather. And depending on, you know, if you have a curve going up, you'll want to follow that curve to the very tip of each of the feathers. So you'll start here in the middle and end exactly on the tip of each feather. So, you know, again, instead of wasting glue, you're going to want to come back on here, bring the next layer over on top of it, and decide, you know, you might want to start in the center of each of these feathers when it's time to do the next process. So I'm going to put this away. So definitely do all 3 layers and get the pencil lines in for the center ridges. So what we are going to be doing is practicing to use this glue gun and trying to get a very smooth center right on the line of your pencil drawing. And you don't want like big bulky pieces and then super thin lines. You just want it to flow smoothly across. And so you want to make sure you have enough glue guns or glue sticks. And whatever size that you're working with, if the smaller one might be easier, but you'll also, depending on the type, you might have to push on this at the same time. I have one small one that, you know, if I'm using it, I'm definitely going to be pushing it in with my thumb. So to practice, what I recommend is just getting a piece of cardboard, drawing a few straight lines on it. You could use one of those plastic mats. And get your glue gun out and try to hold it. You don't want to drag it and just, you know, like, you definitely don't want to like drag it on the line. You actually want it up. You want to have it, you know, start at that, the top and get a ball in, and you're going to want to drag it. You're up, you're just dragging it and pushing the glue out at the same time. And you're trying to make sure it's very fluid. There's no breaks, no big clumps. And so, and it's very hard to see because I don't have a camera on top of me, but the tip is to make sure it's off of the cardboard and practice until you like it. Because when you get to here, and now you're not really on a completely straight line and your cardboard is moving up. The beautiful part about it is when you make your lines, if you're not happy with it, you can just pull it right off. And so I think on this big one, I've yet to do my glue lines. I've done a couple, but what I wanted to show you was once it dried, and you want to keep going on. If you don't like that first one you did, just pull it and it pretty much comes off. And it's okay if some of the cardboard paper comes off with it, but get it all off of there. And typically, you have to pull a little bit, but the whole string will come off. Then you could just start all over. But again, you don't want it on the big one. You won't need to put the glue all the way up here, probably somewhere halfway to the tip. And so you'll work it and you'll get all of that done before we can even begin to paper mache. So that is the process as far as doing the center ridge lines on each of the feathers. And you might want to walk away because when, and I've had to do this because I started painting one time and I realized, oh my goodness, this feather right here wasn't centered right. And when you paint, you're thinking everything's fine until you walk away and you look at it and then you realize, oh, okay, I need to change that. And it's better to start now and make sure it's perfect the way you're going to like it before getting to the painting process. So let me turn that off. So the next thing that we will start is getting our tissue ready. So I just grab like 5 or 6 sheets, fold it in half, and start cutting long strips. And with this, what I typically do is maybe have 3 by 3 inch squares, and then I'll go 2 by 2, 1 by 2, and sometimes have even smaller strips than that. I would say maybe 1/2 inch to 2, 1/2 inch by 2, because you'll need these really small pieces. You can also just rip them, if you need some. But I typically just throw them in a container here, and we'll grab a bunch at the same time in different sizes as I need it. So when you are ready to paper mache, so you'll need your, tissue paper, your scissors to get that part ready for you. You will have your Mod Podge or any of your DIY glue that you're going to be using. I have a little loaf tin pan, disposable, and I make sure to have a new sponge and very damp, and I'll have it here near the paper typically. So you'll definitely want to fill as much as you can, as first, you got to really think. You don't want to pour like a ton of this out unless you have something that you're going to cover it with. If you're going to be, have a whole bunch in here and then you have to walk away, wash your brush, get that cleaned up, because if you leave it in there and forget about it and you don't cover it tight enough, you might lose this glue as well as your brush. So I typically use a 1-inch value brush, and sometimes I'll use the bigger one, which is 2 inches. So typically I just use this. So the other thing I wanted to talk about with the Mod Podge that I use, I talked to you before, there's a matte or a satin finish and then the gloss. The difference between the two, obviously with the finish, other than the finish, is that it seems that the gloss Mod Podge is more thicker, much more thicker. And so if I do this, I might have to help pour it out. With the other one, it would just kind of just flow more easier. Either way, it still works. So I've already gotten ahead of myself already. I've already completed my middle one, and this is only 1 layer so far. I've actually done the back as well. I do not paper mache the neck or the arch where I've stopped from those little cut lines. And so it's okay if the paper goes up. We're going to be working this area later. So you'll definitely want to do at least 2, if not 3 layers of the paper mache. And so you can see the ridge line, or the center feather ridge lines already standing out on this. And so I really took my time because I really wanted to make sure that it was thick enough. I didn't want some super fine line, because as I put my layers with a fine line, you're not going to see it raise. And that's going to help you with your painting, and it just gives it that extra bit of oomph when you're done. So right now this is one layer of the mache. But you're going to want to work very carefully in covering all the edges towards the tips and the corners. And you'll end up doing multiple layers here. But you want to always, as you're working the front, check the back, because you're going to have to, if you're working on the sides, you're going to have to make sure there's glue there to push it back down. So what I recommend when you get to the paper mache stage is, I actually worked on the first one here. I still have one feather to go, and I wanted to show you that. And typically you would think you would want to start paper mache here. I wouldn't do that, because you're wanting to keep this shape. You want it to, and not walk away, you know. So if you started here and you stopped here, something might give here and then stop dropping further down. So you want to start your paper mache in your center of your sculptures. So I typically would start from the top. I'd grab one of the bigger ones, and then I'd work my way down, and I might rip them in half, and I would just work down each feather. I don't work from front and then let it dry and then go to the back. I do the whole piece. So if I'm working on this feather here, I will do it, work on the sides as much as I can, turn it, and then go down this way. So when I need to walk away, I might walk away after this. The front and the back is done. And then, you know, take a break or whatever, then I'll come in and work everything else. And so at first, it might get a little gummy as you're working. If you're putting too many layers on at once, you want to, you might do that more down here, and you'll have to be working very quickly. So don't worry if you can see through, because this is the first layer, and it's already getting pretty firm, you know. It's totally keeping its shape now. And so when you are ready, then go ahead and do the next one. What I wanted to show you was, before you started to do your paper mache, you have all your glue lines down. Make sure that all your tape is totally pressed down. That is, there's nothing sticking up. And if you have any cobwebs, you want to pull those. You know, sometimes you won't see them until you get to a certain angle. Pull them off, because they might cause little ridges under the paper mache, especially if they're big pieces of the cobwebs, the glue cobwebs. So when, you know, like we're on a smaller one now. So I wouldn't, again, paper mache, then the arches in the neck. And so you'll see this is where I've stopped. And so I will paper mache the sides, and I will kind of do it like we tape. So I wanted to show you a couple pieces really quick. Since I'm working on the smaller ones, I'm going to grab maybe these smaller pieces. And if you spread them around, you might just be able to grab one with your brush. And so I will typically just get that area glued, and I will do the back as well, so I can work quickly. The corners, I kind of want you to think about like when we taped, how I told you to do the tips and then wrap it. So I will not always come in at an angle. It doesn't have to be straight, but you want to make sure that you don't leave a bunch of thick pieces of glue or drops of glue, but you want to make sure that the paper and the glue lines up on, you get out any air bubbles and push that paper close to the lines of the glue so they stand out more. Now, when you're working on towards the tips, you know, I kind of do this. I'm moving this around all the time. And you really want to inspect and make sure that you are covering everything. And when you get to the tips, you could, well, you know, you might have to move some paper around sometimes and really get that in there. And if you need to grab more glue, then do it, because you really want the papers to stick. So at this point, you will just keep doing this until you've at least covered the front and the back. And then later, You'll want it to let it dry. I'm just going to stop there for now, but you'll want to let it dry. You'll inspect it, see where you might need to do some touch-ups, and then again do another layer, because you really want a good base when we start to do the painting process. You absolutely do not want to see any cardboard. So inspect these corners here. And the back, again, we're going to do the back, and you might not see on this top one, on the bottom, you know, when it's stacked up, you might see here. So we still want to paper mache everything, because they're separate, 3 separate pieces that are going to be connected. So that's pretty much it. So you want to get your glue lines, your center ridges done. Remember, if you make a mistake, you don't like it, just wait till it dries and then pull it up. You can be careful with it too. Make sure you draw in your lines really dark. Practice on a piece of cardboard or a plastic mat. Get your paper mache stuff ready, and then this is going to take you a while, because again, you're going to have to do front and back. You're going to have to do 2 to 3 layers. Sometimes I do 3 layers, and if on the bigger one, I will probably do that. I will pay attention to the back of the big one, because depending on how you're going to display it, you're going to see it. And so definitely make sure to definitely cover all of that. So that is pretty much it. That is step 5. We're working with the center ridge lines and starting our paper mache. So I will see you again as we get to, oh my goodness, I can't even get my, there we go. When we get to step 6. Thank you guys. I'll see you next time.